so that people can catch up if they miss. All right. And let me make sure I got my stuff here. Yes. So, last time we were talking about protest songs. We kind of compiled our list. We watched those videos, gave us a kind of brief overview um, of the history of protest songs. So we can kind of start to talk initially about, why are these important? Do we still need them today? Um, you know, what makes a protest song, things like that. So for today, we want to start, getting our background in, the legal side of, when, when we are, making protest songs or speeches or, petitions like this picture, when are these things protected? When are they legal? When are they not? What are kind of the details of that? Can we just record anything and call it a protest song and put it on Spotify or anywhere, or are there certain things we need to remember? Okay, so that's what we want to think about today. So to get us started, I have this question for us. I'd like you to think about it, and you can answer it in the chat or come off mute. But what does it mean to amend something? If you are amending something, you're making an amendment. What do you think you're doing? Take your best guess. Take a few minutes, and like I said, you can put it in the chat for me. What does it mean to amend something? What do we think? Any guesses here? Hey, what do we think? What does it mean to amend something? We're amending something. What do you think we're doing? Any thoughts, guesses? Where have you heard that word or where that sounds like it? Like amend or amendment? What do we think of when we hear that stuff? Like maybe I would I'd be making a grocery list and I would have it all done, and then I would remember, oh, I need cereal as well. So I would have to amend my grocery list to include cereal. So that's our example. What do we think it means when we amend something? What are we doing? Let me think, Faye, any guesses? If not, that's okay. But I'd like to hear from you either way. Anything means to amend something. There's life in the chat. Either make better or worse. I think that's pretty fair, because amending something means you are changing it, so you could make it better or worse by amending it, by changing it. You could change it and make it better, or you could change it and make it worse. So yeah, I think not totally off there, definitely. So like I said, if you amend something, you are making changes and you're adding something to it. Just like I said, I would have to amend my grocery list to include cereal because I forgot. So I would have to add that to the list, right? So when we think about amending something, the thing that usually comes to mind is, the amendments in our Constitution, right? The first 10 amendments, the first 10 additions, things we added on, are called the Bill of Rights. Now, this is something you've probably heard from Mr. Rogers or Mr. Townsend before, I'm sure. Adding and subtracting, right? Most of the times just adding. Sometimes you can subtract as well. But yeah, but usually so it can be both, but usually when they refer to, making an amendment, it's usually, adding something or changing something that's already there. All right. So just a quick brief social studies overview. Like I said, I'm sure you've heard this before from either Mr. Townsend or Mr. Rogers, but we have our Constitution, all right, which is the document you create when you form a new country. So we have the Declaration of Independence, then we have the Revolutionary War. America wins the Revolutionary War, so now we're our own country, and we create our Constitution. But then they realize, oh, hey, wait, there's some stuff that we don't have in here that we should probably put in here. So they make 10 amendments. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution are what we call the Bill of Rights. Now there's over, I think, almost 30. But these first 10 are usually what we think of when we talk about our Bill of Rights. They're the most important, they're the most discussed, most debated, and kind of the backbone for a lot of what we do legally. So it's ratified in 1791, right, and gives us Bill of Rights. Do any of these amendments come to mind off the top of your head when you think of amendments to the Constitution? Do you know any, do any ring a bell right away? Any guesses you can take? You can throw them in the chat. Yeah, on the amendments. So, like, the First Amendment is what? The Second Amendment is what? Are there any that you already know off the top of your head, or think you do, and want to take a guess? If you're stumped, I can put a hint in the chat. Think about these two. Think about these two words, and do any of our amendments in the Constitution come to mind? The right to vote, yes. Isn't going to be enforced or judged by law. Awesome. Those are definitely both amendments. We're talking specifically, though, about the first 10 amendments in our Bill of Rights. So the right to vote, doesn't come until we get into like the teens in terms of like the number of amendments. Do we know any of like the first couple, like maybe First Amendment, Second Amendment, any of those? And think about the hint that I put in the chat as well. Does that ring any bells? Yes, great job. Freedom of, there we go. Freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. That's our First Amendment, right? Probably the most debated one. Right of a trial. Again, we're going to get to that one. Really good job. So the important part about this First Amendment here, in terms of what we're talking about for our protest song project, is this part, right to freedom of assembly, freedom of petition, freedom of speech, right? A lot of people just say freedom of speech when they talk about the First Amendment. We have all this up in it as well. Oop. Other rights of people, definitely, definitely. Oh no, did I lose her? Ooh, all right. Which we got that. God only knows what I do without you. Oh, I fucking wish it was just the three of us.
Sorry, my phone died.
No worries, Faye. Welcome back. We will just jump in right where we left off. Okay. We're talking about amendments, Bill of Rights, right? We got our First Amendment, freedom of speech, right? We got Second Amendment, right to bear arms. So that's, you're able to have guns, things like that. Third Amendment, this one is kind of a little archaic at this point. This is the Quartering Amendment, which means like if we're, at war, there's certain laws about, what soldiers can and can't do if, they want to stay in your home or things like that. So we have the Quartering Amendment, the right to search and seizure. So, you got to get a search warrant. Like you kind of alluded to that up there in the chat. Fifth Amendment, right to due process. So people say, I plead the fifth all the time. You don't have to say anything that you think will incriminate you. So that's our Fifth Amendment. Sixth, right to a speedy trial and attorney. I think you had that one in there as well. Sometimes the speedy trial part doesn't always happen, but right to an attorney as well. Right to a trial by jury. I think you had that one in the chat as well. And then Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. So this is, Eighth Amendment says, there can't be any cruel and unusual punishment. Punishment has to fit the crime, right? So if you commit this crime, that's this, level of seriousness. You have to have a punishment that fits that. And now a lot of advocates for nonviolent offenders who are still in jail, or like especially people of color who are in jail for like weed possession or things like that, and they're spending 30 some years in prison. A lot of those advocates argue that it's unconstitutional because that might qualify as cruel and unusual punishment, where you have this person had several ounces of weed and they're in prison for just as long, or if not longer, than someone who was a convicted murderer or rapist, or any of these crazy things. So that amendment has been more in the news in recent years for that stuff. And the last two are kind of catch-alls. The Ninth Amendment says, hey, any of the rights we didn't talk about here, even if we didn't name them, they're covered in the Constitution. And then the 10th Amendment basically says anything we didn't mention in here, it just gets delegated to, anything that's not mentioned here as like a federal right, it gets delegated to the state or to the people, and they deal with it. So like the drinking age or things like that, right? Right, voting stuff. Okay, so that is our Bill of Rights. Now, my next question for you, now that we have all these amendments listed, before we kind of wrap up here, is which amendment in the Bill of Rights do you think is the most important, and why? So take a few minutes and you can answer this question in the chat for me as well. But which amendment do you think, yes, out of these 10, just out of the Bill of Rights. Oops, sorry. So out of these 10, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, right to due process, trial by jury, all these things. Out of all of these, which one do you think is the most important? I know it's a big question, so What do we think? Do you have a thought? Which amendment is the most important? You might be typing now, that's fine too. 15 more minutes. To me, the first one, then number 9, then 7. 7, I think, being trial by jury. Yeah, I agree. I like how you said the first, the first one first. First Amendment freedom of speech. That is usually my vote as well, because I think a lot of these other ones, right, kind of, rely on that First Amendment. That's why a lot of people, when they're arguing about the Second Amendment, whether we should have it, whether we shouldn't, a lot of advocates say there's a reason why freedom of speech is the First Amendment, and then right to bear arms is the second, because we want to be heard first. And then if we're not heard, then maybe we have to, do something else. But I agree, and I like how you included number 9 and number 7, trial by jury, specifically trial by jury of your peers. So really good job. And the key about that First Amendment, the one that most people view as the most important one in the Bill of Rights, as it relates to our project about protest songs, is okay, what is protected in that First Amendment? What is covered in that First Amendment that is, protected by the Constitution? And then what is the stuff that you cannot do that isn't protected? And then how does that apply to, when we want, to write a protest song or a poem or speech, whatever it is, and have our voice be heard? What are the things that we can't do? All right. And this, has also been in the news in the last few months with, the riots at the Capitol, and, hate speech on social media, and things like that. So we want to kind of get this background first before we dive into, the actual protest song. So we know, okay, when you write a protest song, what can you do? What can't you do? Right? How are we going to do all this? I have this link that I'm going to put in the chat for you. All right. I did start recording again. Good. All right. So there is a link in the chat. So go ahead and click that link. They just make sure that it works. And then what I'm going to put in the chat next are some questions to go along with the article at that link. Right. All right. So Faye, just give me a thumbs up or let me know in the chat that your link works and it looks like what I have on my screen right here. So that I know you are in the right spot. Do you have this page pulled up on your end, Faye, from that link I put in the chat?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so then, because we're just about out of time, so what I want you to do with this link is those questions that I put in the chat with the review questions. You can copy paste those, you can screenshot them, whatever works. And I want you to read through this article right here and then have those questions answered for class tomorrow. So you can put them in an email and send them to me that way. You can put them in a Google
I'm gonna
Doc.
send it to your email.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm gonna send it to your email.
Send it to my email. Yeah, that's perfect. So if you want to copy paste the questions or take a screenshot and then just send me your answers in the SFIL email, that's fine. And just have that done by class tomorrow, and then we'll kind of go from there and recap that stuff, and then hopefully move into looking at the actual protest songs. All right. Any other questions on anything before we go?
Your work is not on Classroom, so how do we just submit our work to you by emailing it?
Can you ask it one more time? I was having trouble hearing you.
I said, is your class on Classroom, or are we just emailing everything to you?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I know we're not using Summit, so it's a little bit trickier like in the summer times, but that's why, like I said, you can just email stuff to me, or in the next couple days we're going to be doing stuff in like a Google Doc that I'm going to share with you, and then you can just share that back with me. But yeah, if you're like when in doubt, the easiest way is to just email it to me, because worst case scenario is you just have it in an email instead of in another place, but at least you're still sending it to me. So yeah, so in terms of sending me the stuff, yeah, email or Google Doc, either one of those works fine. In terms of like finding like, okay, what did I miss, like what's due, again, because there's no Summit where you can go look at the checkpoint. You can just message me or email me like, hey, what's due, what are we working on, or just check the Yes Philly YouTube channel to see what we did in class that day. I'm going to have these up on there later today. It should be good. Did that answer your question? I hope.
Yes. Also, how long is summer school?
We are done on the 23rd, right? So this is week 2, and then we have one more week next week, and then the last day is the 23rd.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you got it. I will see you tomorrow.
See ya.